I've run development companies and agencies for probably the last 10 years. What we started to notice in the last year, particularly with AI product development tools, clients would go, yes, that's close, but I'd just like something slightly different, and would be kind of innovating on the fly with us. Taken to the extreme, got to a point where one of our clients said, why don't you just let me drive? So when I saw that start to happen, the penny kind of dropped for me. The best person to develop the software is the business owner. They're the ones who really understand their business, their processes. You can't really call yourself a startup if you don't own your product. You don't have anything. I haven't touched a line of code for a year. Claude is the best software developer I've ever worked with. That is undeniable.
Welcome to The Business Game, the show that breaks business down into real levels, from $0 to $200 billion, so founders can see exactly where they are and what comes next. Today's guest is playing at level 2, which sits in the $1 million to $3 million bracket, the early builder stage. At this level, you've proven the model works. Revenue is coming in, but now you're hiring your first team, installing your first systems, and trying to stabilise delivery. The challenges? Letting go of control, managing people for the first time, and moving from chaos to consistency. The goal? Stop doing everything yourself and build a machine that runs with structure, not stress.
I'm Kalina Steto.
And I'm Steve Plummer.
And today we're joined by Paul Salvage. Paul is the founder of Productly and a fractional CTO specializing in AI product development, helping establish businesses, design, build, and launch software without relying on traditional agencies.
He's spent over 30 years in product development and now sits right at the intersection of AI, software, and business strategy, working with founders who know they need to build products but don't want to hand over control or get stuck in slow, expensive development cycles.
Now Paul is navigating a really interesting shift, building a business in a world where AI is completely reshaping how software gets built, while also challenging the traditional agency model and what it means to actually create and own products. Let's dive in with Paul Salvage. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. It's so nice to have you in the studio.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get straight into it. So you've got a pretty strong take that agency is becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
So what are they getting completely wrong right now?
Yeah, I suppose I'm known for strong opinions and disruptive opinions. And in this case, I'm kind of disrupting myself.
Actually, you're right.
A little bit, yeah.
So, I've run development companies and agencies for probably the last 10 years. And what we started to notice in the last year, particularly with AI product development tools like Claude and Lovable and the likes, is that our clients would give us a brief and, we'd go away and work out the details of the brief and do a design and come back with a design and approve the design and go through that traditional sort of waterfall method of building software. But the actual tooling was so fast that we kept coming back to the client every day saying, okay, well, we're done. What do you think of this? We're done. What do you think of that? And almost invariably, clients would go, yes, that's close, but I'd just like something slightly different, and would be kind of innovating on the fly with us. And what ended up happening is that the clients were sitting with the software developers because it was more efficient, and the cycle time between taking the request and producing the software was compressing so quickly that it wasn't necessary to have like a week-long sprint like you would in a traditional development cycle.
Yeah.
So that, taken to the extreme, got to a point where one of our clients, who happens to be an electrical engineer, said, why don't you just let me drive? Because I know exactly what I want, and exactly the language and the outcome and what I'm looking for. And so the model started morphing to the brief being given and us doing the work and coming back to the client actually driving at least the UI part of the development directly themselves. So when I saw that start to happen, the penny kind of dropped for me. It was like, actually the best person to develop the software is the business owner, because they're the ones who really understand their subject matter, their business, their processes. And there's a huge loss of fidelity that happens when you try and explain that to someone else.
Absolutely.
Even if your process is good, even if they're clever and a good agency, the loss of fidelity is quite significant. So you end up with a product that is good or good enough, but not perfect.
Yeah.
So we've kind of flipped the script there and actually putting our clients in the driver's seat to define the product and even to do a lot of the development. And then it becomes more a case of coaching the client on how to drive these tools, how to set up the data architectures, how to make sure it's secure, how to make sure the integrations work. So the work is, the shape of the work has changed kind of fundamentally for us.
Yeah, wow. So instead of done with you, it's almost what you're saying. Sorry, done for you. It's almost now very much more a done with you.
Exactly. I've actually trademarked the term "build with you" with no spaces in it, because that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to build with you. And it's always an uncomfortable thing in the traditional agency model, is that the client never owns that code if they don't have their own staff developing it. They're reliant on the agency, and if the agency goes away or loses their developers, or the clients just get tired of paying the premium of using an agency, they're kind of trapped because you don't really own the code. So I'm strongly of the opinion that businesses should own their own code, and particularly startups. You can't really call yourself a startup if you don't own your product. You don't have anything.
And it's such a good, I love that you've sort of taken that shift, because I know personally when I was building my own software, there was that handing over your idea and trying to explain it, no matter how simplified you make it, whenever it would come back, it's not it.
It's not quite it.
Not quite it. But being able to build it and being shown the tools and how to actually hold the driver's seat is really cool that you're
exactly.
That space.
Some of the products we've built with that approach have a depth and a complexity that you could never explain to a person.
Yes.
In the case of his engineering firm, it's asset management for large mines. So there's 6 levels of assets and failure modes and tasks, and it's incredibly complex. Only an engineer that's worked in that space for 20 years would get it.
Yes.
And what he's managed to build with me or with us is actually a product that you could never have got an agency to build for you. They would have been frustrated beyond belief.
Diving into that a little bit more, Paul, I'm curious. AI is taking all of the jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just curious then, how much of building a software product today is still that human work, and how much of it is AI?
Well, the human work is the inspiration and the vision and the empathy with the end user for what this thing is actually going to do. That's quite hard to replace with AI. So that knowing what to build, I think it's going to. I can't see that leaving the human realm. So that the inspiration, knowing what to build, what it needs to do, how it supports the business processes, I think is very much a human job. But when it comes to the code or the data architecture or the integrations, I haven't touched a line of code for a year.
Wow.
I don't. In the early days, I would still go and review it and kind of check if it looks all right. I don't even bother doing that anymore. The code is perfect.
But was there moments in that it was hard to let go of doing that?
It was. I went from a 20-person development agency, very comfortably doing quite well on making a 50% margin on the hours that I was selling underneath that. And all of a sudden realizing that actually I was on the wrong side of the trend here. And while I could probably survive another couple of years in that mold, because people still do need software built for them because they're not there yet, they're not ready to dive in. But as I said, I'm a disruptive sort of person, so I'd rather be the one disrupting my own model than being on the receiving end of the world changing.
And how does that change in terms of pricing and time frames? So when you're comparing, going to an agency and you're paying that premium to going with Productly or the like, and the time frames are different, you're actually back in the driver's seat as a customer. How does that? What's the difference?
Yeah, it's very different. The time frames have compressed from 3 to 6 months to 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Jeez, it's incredible.
And the pricing is no longer you're paying for development hours. You're paying essentially for the build with you support, which is a package that we offer to guide the product development methodology so that you do the things in the right order and don't get ahead of yourself, and particularly paying attention to Data architecture, I think, is where most people get tripped up in AI product development.
Okay.
And then, testing and security and integration. So it's more of a, I suppose more of a coaching role than a outsource role.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's different for different people. The medium-sized business with an engineer as the CEO is very different to a startup with for example, an NDIS compliance solution. The skill sets of those people and their needs for support are quite different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Mm. So with this 30 years of experience in this space, was there a particular moment where you realized that this new version of your business was actually working?
Well, it's all pretty new. I sat in the chair just across the road, being interviewed by your team about 18 months ago. And at that point, no-code development, which is visual software development, kind of configuring things visually, was very much the best way to do things. I don't think Claude had just been released.
Yes.
Lovable didn't really exist yet. Things have moved so fast. So I would say it's in the last 6 months that the quality of code being produced is at a level that is as good as any developer I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
So whereas in the early days I was still kind of like, need to check that. That's could do anything. But I would say the last 6 months has been,
Sure.
the quality of code has just gone through the roof, and also the level of flexibility in managing infrastructure and integrations. It's just getting so much kind of richer. It's not just dumb websites anymore. It's this morning I deployed a HIPAA compliant medical record solution to AWS in 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And I'm not an AWS expert. So,
Wow. You've been in product development for 30 odd years. What was the moment where you realized that this version of your business is actually working?
well, I think it's been a path in those 30 years. 30 years ago I was in Silicon Valley lugging hardware upstairs to data centers, writing our own software development languages, writing our own database technology so that we didn't have to pay Oracle and Sun for their kit. And bit by bit programming has evolved, and through object-oriented programming into no-code development, and now with AI. And it's got to a point where Claude is the best software developer I've ever worked with.
Yeah, wow.
And
Okay.
that is undeniable.
Wow.
That's not to say he, she has the insight and the context of what it's trying to do. That has to come from the person in the driver's seat.
Yes.
What is the context? What are we trying to achieve? What does the product need to do? Who's it serving? All of those human characteristics are still very much in the driver's seat. But,
Yes.
but from that to producing the code is compressed from years and dozens of people in a team to a morning having coffee on the couch.
That's amazing. In terms of the hallucinations that we hear about with AI, how does that sort of come into play with the coding? Is that, like you said, you don't really even need to check the coding anymore? Is that something that's kind of become obsolete? It's learned enough now. It's not hallucinating as much.
It's hallucinating a lot less, and as I said, I think what you shouldn't underestimate is how careful you need to be about setting that context and about setting memory and managing the development environment. If you just jump in there and say, "Hey, I want to build a booking system for my hotel," and you don't give it any context, you will end up with probably with a mess. But,
Yeah. Okay.
So I think the methodology and the approach is still very important. God, who knows, in 5 years' time, all of that will probably be baked into the platforms very well, and it'll ask you the right questions.
Yes.
But right now, that methodology, the context, code checking, the security checking, all of that is quite important.
Okay. It's still learning.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned before how fast things have changed in the last 6 months. How do you keep up?
Well, that's probably maybe a third of my time is just spent just seeing where the cutting edge of it is going. I've taken a decision to kind of choose some of my products. Like I like the Anthropic ecosystem particularly, because I think there are so many tools popping up that are that you couldn't possibly keep up with all of them. So you kind of need to choose a horse a little bit and back it. And from there, I think Anthropic are the ones doing the best job at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. And for our listeners, can you explain a little bit more of the Anthropic?
Sure. And so Anthropic are the owners of, or the producers of Claude, and Claude has kind of three components at the moment. The one is a chat component, which I think most people are familiar with by now.
Yeah.
ChatGPT really created that space. So Claude Chat is a version of that. Then there's a co-work space, which is basically about taking control of your computer and doing things for you.
Yep.
So, for example, every morning, Claude co-works checks my calendar, checks my emails, schedules my diary, reminds me about things that I mustn't miss, and chooses the one thing that I have to get done that day. So it's kind of my own personal productivity coach.
Amazing.
So co-work is automating your work.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's communicating with you. And of course, there's Claude Code, which is the development environment, which is, like I said, the best developer I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
And where are you going to keep your finger on the pulse with the AI stuff?
It's a good question. YouTube.
Yeah, no,
I mean, it's such good content.
Yeah.
And actually Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity themselves.
Just using it and asking.
Just asking.
Okay.
I want to do this. Give me the 3 ways that I could consider doing this. Critically analyze which one I should take.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I think that's actually probably the right answer. Is the tools themselves will give you the answers.
What a time to be alive.
Well, not a time to be a small business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an opportunity.
It's no longer out of reach.
No. And I saw a chart actually, semi recently, of how many people are still not actually engaging with AI. It's still very at the beginning for a lot of the world, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. It's pretty overwhelming for a lot of people.
It is.
To your point, how do you keep up? And I think there are a large number of people out there who just go, I cannot keep up, so I'm not going to even engage. I'm out.
And that's a dangerous position to be in for a business owner.
Unless you want to retire.
Depends on which side of the working life you're sitting.
Paul, you mentioned before how you were a disruptor of your own model and so forth. And one of the things you've said is that your breakthrough was becoming the go-to guy.
Yeah.
And so what did you do differently that made people start seeing you that way?
I think it's about ownership and about energy. Like getting anything done at high quality, whether it's in the software realm or, in your case, building the business game, or any business owner out there, there will be times when it gets really hard.
Yes.
And I think that, taking ownership and standing in the middle of it. Seth Godin has a great term, which I like, called being the linchpin. He wrote a book called The Linchpin, which, it kind of is all about standing in the middle of it and being the one putting it together. And I think anything worth doing needs a linchpin. And
Absolutely.
I think once I realized I was good at being that in whatever domain I was in, that was a kind of a big light switch moment for me. That you have to take ownership and step into the middle of things.
Yeah.
And when you did that I don't know, did that boost your confidence or your clarity, or did that give you more, I don't know, passion or whatever to go to market more? Like, was it just, I guess, emotionally, or rather than physical things?
There's a sense of ownership that comes with that I think is very empowering, and takes it out of just a job or just another project.
Yes.
I think particularly when you're running a services business like I have been for the last 10 years, it's not your business. So you could take a view of, well, it's not. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's not a very rewarding way to work. So I think stepping in the middle and taking ownership makes it more meaningful.
Yeah.
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 In terms of staying consistent in revenue, in particular in this space, I imagine it's been really hard because it's ever changing and it's changing very quickly. So was there a moment where things almost broke when you were trying to, get that consistent revenue? Was it clients, positioning, or just doing too much yourself? And what shifted?
Yeah, I think trying to scale the hours business, the agency business is difficult. And not just in software development. I think in marketing agencies, ad agencies have the same challenge. Once you get beyond about 20 people, it becomes hard to maintain the quality. It's hard to maintain the relationship with the clients because you can't own all those relationships yourselves, and you start having to kind of add layers into the business. And I think that was starting to happen. And actually, in a way, this pivot driven by AI has actually saved me from that, because it's driven me back to fewer things, higher quality, much more depth, fewer people. I can do a lot more than I could have.
Yeah, it's doing a lot of that time-consuming thing.
A lot of that time-consuming stuff is gone.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Paul, you work across multiple countries already. What's been harder about that than you expected, competing internationally?
Time zones.
Oh.
Yeah, I have
It
clients.
seems so simple,
I have clients in the US. I have clients in South Africa. I have clients here, and that's basically the two different sides of the world. So being available and keeping those relationships going, keeping those projects going when you've got a 5 a.m. call and one 8 p.m. call is difficult. I think that's been probably the hardest thing. I don't think business is different in the US. Well, I mean, of course it's different.
There are nuances.
There's nuances, but it's not fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Well, certainly in English-speaking Western countries.
Yeah.
The Business Game is proud to partner with High Level, the all-in-one CRM and marketing platform built for growing businesses. With CRM funnel, website and course builders, marketing automations, email builders, and so much more, High Level software will drive your customer attention and your profits through the stratosphere. And High Level is fully white label, which means you can brand the platform and mobile app with your logo and company colours and then resell it to your customers for a monthly subscription. Ready to go High Level? Click on the link below to begin your 14-day free trial.
So how do you manage that then? Because there'll be people listening to us today that, actually, I've got that same problem. Have you got any tips about how you maintain your energy, you don't burn out, how you maintain your enthusiasm when it is 8 p.m. at night?
Yeah.
Been up since 5 a.m., but I think
I think asynchronous tools like Slack and Loom, video recording stuff that you can break the need to be synchronously in contact all the time has been the key for me.
Okay.
Because I can't do 5 a.m. phone calls anymore.
Yeah, fair enough.
Can't get enough caffeine in me by 5 a.m.
Not to answer those very important questions.
And what about stuff outside of work? Do you do any one or two things that reset you or help you maintain your a high vibe so you can show up for those multiple spans?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love nature. In particular, I love the ocean, so I'm in the ocean almost every single day.
Yeah, okay.
And that's kind of my meditation, my exercise, my connection to the spiritual, and that I love the ocean.
Yeah, okay. And so extrapolating that, is your message then to, if you do work across multiple countries and so forth, to find what works for you, to enable you to do this? Is that an important part of success?
I think so. And I think, for me, structuring my day, and I mentioned, having Claude plan my day for me, and it's not random, it's quite specific. Like, I know that between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. I'm great at deep work. I know that I tend to miss details late afternoon, so any admin stuff and important stuff I put early in the morning.
Right.
So I'm quite disciplined about structuring my day and also prioritizing, making sure I'm very clear on what's important that day and what's not. Because if you're not clear, you can get dragged in a dozen different. I've got 8 projects running right now. I could be dragged in 8 different directions.
Yes.
And just on that then of prioritizing, knowing that you don't do details well in the afternoon, has AI helped with that, as into identified, or were you just self-aware enough to go, I'm foggy in the afternoon, don't hand me anything, or I've got to...
Yeah, I think that was more self-awareness, but I think AI has helped me with the planning and the remembering of some of those details. Like, I like to do more creative things and learning things late afternoon into the evening.
Yeah.
I find that's just what works for me. Different from someone else.
Yeah.
In terms of business, what's one mistake that you see other founders sort of at your stage making over and over again?
It's a good question. I think a big one for particularly services businesses is underestimating brand and pipeline and kind of,
Yes.
having a strong brand and a good pipeline with one or two channels that you do really well in, that you've always got kind of a flow of conversation and interest. It's very easy in a services business to go from feast to famine.
Yes.
I've got a nice big job,
Yeah.
head down,
Yeah.
pop up 3 months later, and no, I've got no leads.
Yeah. And in terms of the brand, do you want to sort of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something I probably underestimated for a long time as well. I've always been in the product space and the technology space, and kind of a little bit dismissive of brand and advertising, and but the truth is, I think it is very, very important. Maybe not only from a communications point of view, but also from a positioning and a messaging point of view of like, who are you and what are you doing? Like,
Yes.
I'm pretty clear that I'm here to support business owners who want to build their own product with AI.
Yes.
That's me.
Yes.
And I think if you can't communicate it that simply to someone, then you probably need somebody
Back to the drawing
back.
board.
Yeah.
So just to, I guess, drill down a little bit on that a little bit more, what are you doing now around that brand piece? What are you doing, I guess, differently now than you were, say, 3 years ago around brand?
Yeah. Well, I'm very focused on LinkedIn because that's where most of my customers are. And believe it or not, I'm starting to set up this type of environment and actually produce content, which I've been allergic to for just because I don't feel comfortable in front of cameras and microphones.
Yeah.
But I think in today's business world, if you're in a niche and you need to communicate it, I don't know if there's another way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly one of the best ways.
Yeah, I agree.
And a good way to provide value as well.
Absolutely. It's a giving thing.
To give content.
Yes, yeah.
Anything else? Doing differently?
I would say that those two things are the big thing, and then just networking in general. Again, I'm an introvert. I'm a technologist. I've always been in the back room, and it's not natural for me to be out meeting people. But if you're running your own business, you have to do it. You have to become good at it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a good muscle exercise.
Yeah. That does lead me into, and you perhaps have answered that, but it leads me to the question we often ask our guests in terms of your leadership evolution. So just reflecting on that journey in the last couple of years, what did you personally have to stop doing or start doing to become the leader that your business needs now?
That's interesting because my career path is probably somewhat unusual in that I took quite big roles very young. I was IT executive of listed companies at the age of 27, and had 30 out of 1,000 people working for me across 24 countries in Africa and the Middle East.
Wow.
So I've kind of gone the other way. But to answer your question, I think being super clear about who I am has changed, and about what's important to me and what I value has been probably the biggest change. That I'm not just there to do what anyone wants of me. I'm pretty clear about who I am and what I value.
Yeah.
That's really interesting coming from someone who has worked internationally. And you said, managing 1,000 people across multiple countries. That's a
big job, yeah.
Very senior and mature job. But it's almost like you finally realize some stuff about yourself by stepping out of that environment.
Yeah, exactly. I think I fell into those roles because I was in the right place at the right time and because I took ownership.
Yeah.
And I was a safe pair of hands, not necessarily because I wanted to do those roles or even that I was particularly good at them. My skill is innovation and product development and moving quickly and disrupting. I found myself running IT for a telecoms group across 24 countries with 250 million customers by accident.
That's an awesome accident.
Yeah, may there be more great.
Yeah, exactly. Also got in a few civil wars, was bombed a few times.
Yes,
Area 3 times.
my goodness. Okay. But you're still managing a small team directly. So how do you stay hands-on without becoming the bottleneck?
Well, the team is getting smaller and smaller, as I've said, and really, I'm literally eating my own dog food in this case, where everything is automated. I have agents running sales, running marketing, running my content, running my accounting, running everything. So, my team is shrinking, and I think that's going to be a trend for business in general. I think the niches are deepening. The level of innovation and strategy and clarity is becoming kind of elevated. I don't think mediocre businesses just doing what everyone else is going to do, particularly if it involves people sitting behind screens, are going to thrive or even survive. You've got to be kind of excellent, which is just a challenge for people out there creating businesses and getting into the workplaces. What are you going to be excellent at?
Yeah. Wow. So, sorry, Steve. So these agents that you're referring to that are running these, are these AI?
AI agents, yeah.
Wow. So you just have you trained them all through Claude, or is it?
Some are through Claude, some are through other technologies, but they're all they're taking the noise away from me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Again, I'll ask a question we ask most guests about their systems and approaches, and I sense you've already answered this in some ways, but I want to ask him to get your take on it, to see if there's something different that drops in, because the question is, what system or structure or hire has made the single biggest difference in your growth? Now, I'm guessing you're going to say something about AI and AI agents, but
pretty much.
What you haven't, is there something in that you haven't touched on yet that drops in for you so that other people can learn from in this AI environment?
Yeah, I think training them on your data and having a feedback loop to them, because it's quite easy to create AI agents that are sort of linear, using Zapier or Make or whatever your preferred visual automation tool is. Yeah. And typically they don't learn very well, and they don't learn from their own data. So I think designing them with feedback loops so that they're kind of self-reinforcing and have clear guardrails around what they can and can't do, because that's another common mistake is to not have guardrails, and then you put out some piece of content that's completely off brand or worse.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That's interesting. An interesting nuance, if you like, to the AI piece about creating those loops, those feedback loops.
Yes, I think that has been quite hard to do with some of the more user-friendly tools that are out there. So I think that's an opportunity for improvement in those tools, but also just in people applying agents to their businesses. Make sure they're self-reinforcing and use your data and have knowledge bases, and all actually, basing the decisions and actions on your business, not just on hallucinations.
Yes. Yeah.
And I guess that's almost that ownership piece you were talking about before, isn't it? If you've put that in, you are taking more ownership of your AI tools.
Correct. Yeah, and human in the loop, I think, is still very important. So put yourself in the loop until you're sure that they're trained to the level that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So what does that, just again for our listeners, what does that look like? Put yourself in the loop.
So literally put yourself in the loop of the process. So before something goes out, it has to be approved by you, even if it's just a Slack message or an email saying, "Have you checked this? Are you happy with it?" Respond yes, and then it goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Those kinds of in the loop is what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but clearly it's not, though. If it's something that you've had to do deliberately.
Yeah, I think it's very easy for, I guess, lay people to automate something and it works once, and they take it working once as an indication that it will always work. And actually, once you're into production, the edge cases catch you out.
Yes.
So that's I guess the warning I would give is, just because it works once doesn't mean it's right.
It's that lack of understanding and knowing the full
Exactly.
capacity and capabilities of AI. And so with all these different agents, do you have some sort of way of like a tracking system of like a dashboard? Like, okay,
Yeah.
you do.
I do,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did you create that yourself?
I did actually. Yeah, I do.
Like you're selling that? Like,
Yeah, I was like,
That's a good idea. Yeah, a nice product. Yeah.
oh, honestly, like in my mind, like the average Joe who doesn't the average Joe who wants to, maybe build a business and have some agents to start, running these things. What would you say is the best way to get started and to learn how to create them and create these loops and create those guardrails and all those sorts of pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I think Claude or something like that Claude Code is your friend.
Sure.
There are simpler tools out there, things like Zapier, things like Make, things like N8N, which are kind of visual automation tools, which are very user friendly. But I feel like the abilities of AI coding is surpassing those quite quickly.
Sure.
And you're actually better off building your own discrete little agents using something like Claude Code.
Okay.
And then, as I said, building visibility.
Yes.
That observability is the word that they like to use
Okay.
of what's actually going on,
Yes.
because it's quite hard sometimes to know. So designing that observability into it,
Okay.
particularly if it's automating manufacturing processes and things that have significant implications if they're wrong. It's not just a bad LinkedIn post. It's,
then you can recover easily from a bad LinkedIn post.
generally.
You can take it down or
You can delete it.
get it out. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So with AI reshaping this entire space, it's obviously taking you on a whole different route in terms of running a business. Is there anything that you had to personally really rethink and readjust internally with moving forward with running a business? Obviously, like you've sort of said, your journey in business has almost been reversed. You started out in these big roles and now you're kind of going this other way. Is there anything that you've really had to go and rethink?
I do think it's forced me to rethink the service offering and to narrow it down to one thing. It's tempting in services businesses to kind of say yes to almost anything, especially if you need the revenue.
Yes.
The problem with that is it sets up hiring of very different types of people or very different types of processes, and you actually end up with, you don't really have a business. You have a mess that you're constantly managing and trying to put fires out. It can't scale. And ironically, I think AI and things like agents and developing turning service into software products or into AI-powered services forces you to think through exactly what it is, because it's in software now. It can't just be, today it's you like it blue and you like it red, so we'll do one of each. Where you have to be more specific on exactly what it is you're going to offer.
Yes.
Which I think is a good thing. I think that sets you up for a better business generally.
Absolutely. Well, you'll be able to find your target audience, right? Because they'll be able to.
Yes, exactly.
Well, can you share some cheat codes with us? Everyone wants shortcuts in the cheat code. So
What are we talking about here?
well, if someone was running a business like yours, but they were a couple of years behind you and where you are now and the changes you've gone through. And if they came to you and said, Paul, I want a shortcut or a cheat code to help me accelerate my development, what would you tell them?
Tell them there are no shortcuts.
Right, other than
No.
Yeah.
No, I would say if you're in my type of business, developing products or developing software, and you've been doing it traditional ways, and you haven't kept up to speed with what Claude Code and Cursor and the likes can do, you need to get up to speed real quick, because it's not what you think. It's well past.
Damn.
It's just churning out slop, as people used to like to say. It's absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that, unfortunately, as I said, I don't think that's a cheat code. I think, but I do think knowing the possibilities and actually using it yourself, getting your hands dirty and I guess being bold with it and trying to build things is the only way. Because if you're on the outside, it's moving so fast, you're never going to get back in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so is there any way then, is there a cheat code or a shortcut to get in? Or is it a matter of just rolling your sleeves up and getting familiar with Claude or one of those others?
I think it is. I mean, probably the one tip I would give is to choose a problem that you really care about. Don't go and just do YouTube tutorials creating someone else's CRM system or something that's not meaningful to you. Choose something meaningful. Ask the tools to tell you how to build it. Follow it yourself.
Yeah.
If it's something you care about.
Yeah. Okay.
So what was the moment where things almost broke in terms of business? So was there a moment where you were going to just throw in the towel and go and do something else? And if so, how did you stabilize or turn it around?
I don't think it was really breaking. I suppose as we spoke about earlier, I've deliberately decided to disrupt myself before I kind of really needed to.
Yes. Yeah.
So, hopefully, well, I think that's headed off that kind of falling apart place. And I think the deliberate decision to kind of be an AI native business, so not just a business using some AI tools, but one that's actually run end to end in AI, has been fundamental for me, and I suspect maybe fundamental to some of your audience. If you look at where the big venture capital companies are spending money, they're not investing in law firms that use AI.
No.
They are investing in AI firms that provide law.
Yes. Yes.
And that's I think that opportunity is out there for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the opportunity or the opposite of opportunity, that business is dying off, we mentioned at the start that the agency model is kind of broken or it's on the way out.
Yeah.
And so what is going to replace an agency, and what are the implications for current service providers that maybe they're not yet aware of?
Yeah, well, I strongly believe that companies can and should be owning their own technologies. They should be building these products and software and automations for themselves. Outsourcing it is both was only really done because it was too expensive to hire those skills in-house.
Yeah.
That's no longer really true. And I think more and more, if you want to survive in this sort of AI native world that I spoke about, you have to immerse yourself in that technology. Otherwise, just getting someone to build you an agent or an automation on the outside that you don't understand, that you don't control, that you can't update is treading water, and your competitors that do embrace it will just move so much faster and outcompete you.
Yeah, and that's interesting what you said. You don't understand and can't update. So we spoke about how fast things are changing. So if you don't understand and don't update, you might get ahead of everyone, and then a week later, because you don't understand and don't update, all of a sudden,
Yeah. So I think it's a bit of like an arms race. It's like for many businesses, you literally need to, not for every business, of course. There's physical businesses that probably don't, but I'm talking about businesses that are digital or service related. Fundamentally, I think you need to own it. I think you need to have it in the house. You need to keep up, and that means changing your strategy and your staffing and your skill sets and who you're hiring for to support that. If it's not important enough for you to bring it in the house, then it's probably not important enough for you to do, and you should actually just not do it.
Yeah,
it's kind of my view now.
There's an interesting litmus test for listeners, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is it if you're telling me you don't have time to do it and you don't want to invest in the learning to do it, then it's not important enough. Yeah. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Wow.
There you go. And I feel like I kind of already know the answer to this question, but I'd love to hear your take on it. So what do you think is going to happen to founders who don't adapt to this AI revolution in the next 2 to 3 years?
So Macca's will be hiring for the next couple of years.
Do you want fries?
Yes, yeah.
Until the robots.
There we go. I'm glad I asked. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the way that it is, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks for that uplifting.
I know. And on that note, well, I think it might be a fun time to jump into some quick fire questions to get to know you a little bit more personally.
Yeah.
So we're going to throw 10
Oh,
rapid fire questions at you. Just answer one,
Sure.
2 words or sentence. Steve, are you ready? You want to take this one?
Yep, I'll go. So, are you an Android or iPhone?
who cares?
You don't have a phone?
I do have a phone, but I couldn't care less what it is.
Yeah. Okay. What's your coffee order?
Black.
All right.
Okay. Are you an office or a work from home?
I'm a work from home guy.
And what was your first job?
My first job, well, my very first job was a jazz musician in Europe, cold and poor and hungry.
Whoa! Oh my
That's
goodness.
first. We've never had a jazz.
That's fun.
Or what's one piece of tech you couldn't live without?
I think today it's Claude.
Yeah. Are you an early riser or a night owl?
I'm an early riser.
Okay. Your go-to productivity hack?
Plan your day.
Yep. What's the best investment you've ever made?
Actually, I bought a piece of art on a whim from a relatively, at that stage, unknown artist who ended up becoming famous, and that was my best investment ever.
Well,
Oh.
do you want to share?
Yeah, I was like,
This is-
It's a South African artist you wouldn't have heard of. Sam Claude is
Okay. Wow. Interesting. All right. What's your book or podcast recommendation?
Good to Great, I think it's a Jim Collins is a really it's about that, that we spoke about taking ownership and like being very clear about what you want. And I think that book's all about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what career would you choose?
I think I'd go back to jazz.
Hungry on the street.
All righty. We're just about out of time, Paul. So if business truly is a game, Paul Salvage, how do you define winning?
I define winning doing things that are of value to people around me, to my customers, to the people that I work with, people that work for me. At the end of the day, I think that's the only important thing. It's nice to make some money and to be able to survive into retirement, but the real winning is doing things that are actually used by others, that are valuable to others.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Oh, this has
Nice
been
to-
fantastic. We really appreciate it. Yeah, nice to have you back. Where can people find you online if they want to connect?
Sure, LinkedIn is a good one. Paul Salvage, you'll find me on there. Otherwise, productly.dev is our website.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, that's all we've got time for. If this episode resonated with you, follow The Business Game on your platform of choice so you can keep getting more episodes like this.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.